This is Jason with Chicago News, and no, we did not find a time machine. This is 2018, but we've got this 2018 4Runner, which kind of looks like it might be from 2009. This, however, is a favorite of off-roaders. It's got kind of a cult following, so there's a reason it doesn't change very often. When you look at this thing, you see these 6-lug hubs, you know there's something serious going on underneath. So let's check it out and see what it's all about. One of the tip-offs that this isn't the most modern design is this manual liftgate. There's no power option, no foot swinging option, nothing like that. But what you do get is this really cool window feature. You can lower this to throw your bags in here. Obviously, when you're driving too, you can have this open for a little ventilation, which is cool. A lot of times we test the off-road capability of vehicles like this, but Toyota's given us this luxury limited version as opposed to, say, the TRD Pro version, which you can also get. It's got definitely decidedly on-road tires. It's kind of a shame for this capable of an off-road chassis to be stuck on-road with it. It's got a pretty classic look on the outside. There's really not that much more to say about that. So let's hop inside and see about the inside. Amazingly, behind the wheel of this 4Runner on city streets, at least, Chicago city streets, it's somewhat like driving off-road. This thing actually has great ride quality. They've done a good job tuning the suspension. Again, with a really mature platform like this, you would expect that they have had a lot of time to engineer the suspension properly. Especially being body on frame and having a live rear axle, it doesn't have any of that side-to-side movement that you sometimes can feel from that chassis configuration. And it's even pretty quiet on the inside. Definitely not luxury vehicle quiet, but considering this is a 4Runner, it feels pretty quiet in here. Unfortunately though, the design of the interior, the materials that are chosen, everything in here feels pretty dated and kind of cheap. You've got really thin plastics everywhere on the inside here. You can tell they've gone for kind of like a rugged Jeep look. They've got these really large knobs for the temperature control, the off-road controls here. Ultimately, everything's got that sort of rugged feel to it, but it doesn't have a very substantial feel. It all feels a little bit chintzy, which is a shame because overall, driving-wise, on the road, this feels very stable and substantial. Only engine choice for any 4Runner is this 4-liter V6, and it's got a decent amount of power, 270 horsepower, and it feels funny to say this, but it's got a bit of a dated feel driving-wise. You know, this thing doesn't make power until it's at the top of its rev range. Even the sound doesn't quite line up with the modern V6s that Toyota's put out. You know, it's ultimately maybe part of the charm for people who are 4Runner enthusiasts to have an engine that reminds them of some past 4Runners. So there may be a reason they haven't stuffed the brand new 3.5 liter V6 into this. What often happens with body-on-frame vehicles, you end up sitting too high because the actual floor has to sit up on top of a frame rail. With a unibody vehicle, they can set the floor much lower. But here you've got plenty of headroom. Unfortunately, it's just for the driver. This seat has an up and down adjustment. The passenger seat lacks that. It's only 4-way adjustable. And the rear seat is the same height as the passenger seat. So for the driver, it's great. All of your passengers, not as much. See what I mean about the sound of this engine? It's just got a little edge to it that doesn't sound like some of the more modern engines do. It's not a bad thing, it doesn't sound bad, and it certainly has got a decent amount of power, 270 horsepower. But there's just something about it. And again, like I said, maybe that's intentional. A few more dated things on the interior here. You've got this digital clock. You've got this really dated low resolution LCD in the center here. It gives you some efficiency information. When you're stopped, it actually shows you the angle of steering of the front wheels, which is kind of funny. It actually could be kind of helpful in an off-road situation. But that display itself, it's a tiny low res LCD. Even the main screen is only a 6.1 inch screen, which they call high resolution, but it doesn't really have very high resolution. This has got JBL premium audio as well. Even the audio system sounds a little bit dated. The bass is boomy. The mids and highs get a little bit distorted at higher volumes. It just doesn't stand up to some of the more modern premium audio systems. Our test vehicle comes with automatic running boards, and in a very Toyota-like fashion, there's a button here so you can turn them on and off, which for some unknown reason, besides some of these rotary controls, is the biggest button in the vehicle. The other thing about these power running boards, not only does it give you this big clunky switch, but it's not really necessary. This thing isn't really that high up. I don't know if the TRD Pro version's higher, but this thing really isn't high enough to warrant it, especially for $1,500 option. I would definitely save your money on that option. You know, you've just got a wide variety of sizes, shapes of buttons. Even the seats, which in this luxury version are heated and cooled, have a little rotary knob as opposed to the standard button. There's just a lot of different controls, which lends to a little bit of a disjointed feel on the inside. Another control that kind of makes me scratch my head is there's a button to turn on and off the rear AC power outlet. So you've got a 120 volt outlet in the back in the cargo area, which is great, but there's a button to turn it on and off. I don't know why you would want to turn it off. I guess maybe to save some power, but it just seems like an unnecessary feature to be able to turn it on and off. There's only the one USB connection up front here, but there's a ton of 12 volt outlets. You've got one up front, one in the center console here, two in the back seat, and one in the cargo area. So 5 total 12 volt outlets. So you can't really plug very many USB devices, but if you've got a lot of 12 volt plugs, you can plug them anywhere here. Plenty of little storage pockets as well. You've got some pockets up here in the door panel. You've got a giant center console. You've got some room in the center here. Plenty of little storage places, which is something you'd expect from a truck like this. One of the other drawbacks of the little bit dated engine here is it just doesn't have the efficiency of some of the modern engines. With full-time all-wheel drive in this older V6, definitely not the most efficient SUV you can get. It's rated at 17 miles per gallon city, 20 highway. Right now it's showing us 14.5 on the average. Obviously we've been driving a little bit hard, doing some acceleration runs and that sort of thing, but I think the ratings are a little bit optimistic. Handling is definitely not what people are looking for when they buy a 4Runner, but it's competent enough for an SUV. Again, the ride is what surprised me the most. It really has a good, supple ride quality without being too floppy and leany and feeling like it's going to tip over on you, which is pretty impressive for something that has supposedly the off-road capability of this. Again, we didn't really get to check it. Unfortunately, we really didn't get to test the off-road capability. If Toyota had provided one of the TRD Pro versions, there's 2 levels of TRD Pro. They add all kinds of features like cut bumpers with skid plates, front and rear, locking rear differential, different suspension, off-road tires, that sort of thing. Honestly, if we were going to pick a 4Runner to get, it would be the TRD Pro. $45,000 for the one we're sitting in right here. You can get the top of the line TRD Pro with all of the features for $43,000. The lower TRD Pro starts at $39,000. Again, with the off-road heritage of the 4Runner, it kind of makes me wonder why anyone would choose this limited luxury quote-unquote version instead of that TRD Pro. Some of the controls for the 4-wheel drive systems and the traction control are up here in the upper console, which is a little bit weird. I'm not 100% a fan of it. If you're doing an off-road trail with this thing, you know, maybe you're on a downhill and you're sort of looking up, it makes sense. You want to keep your eyes up on the trail. It's got descent control here, traction control. You can go different modes and turn the traction off up here. There's also a bit of a dated control for the sunroof. You've got one button for the slider and another button to tilt it. Seems like these days you could do that with one button. Okay, let's get to some conclusions about this 4Runner. First of all, we really didn't get to try out the off-road capability, which is one of the big selling points of the 4Runner. It's certainly the reason why it's got such an enthusiastic following. Unfortunately, on the inside, it really hasn't been updated enough to compete with some of its more modern rivals. For an on-road luxury SUV, it doesn't really tick all the boxes. There's lots of content missing, especially any of the active safety measures, and this is the highest option one you can even get. The drivetrain's feeling a little bit dated, the body-on-frame construction is a little bit dated. Really, if you're looking at a 4Runner, it's probably because you're already a 4Runner enthusiast, and if that's the case, you're probably going to go for the TRD Pro version.